Hello, welcome to Mission 919, my channel devoted to stories and information of African achievement, well-being, and prosperity. And today we're going to talk about Tunis Gulic Campbell. Tunis Campbell was born in 1812 in Middlebrook, New Jersey. He was the eighth of 10 children. Um, he was the youngest youngest son. Um, his father was a blacksmith. At the age of 5, he was sent to Babylon, Long Island, to an Episcopal school, and he stayed there for 10 years or so. Um, when he graduated, he he started to work on behalf of the American Colonization Society, which advocated that free blacks migrate to Liberia. But after William Lloyd Garrison founded his organization in 1831 or 1832, he left the colonization movement and joined Garrison's movement. And he vowed that he would not leave the country until slavery was ended everywhere in the United States. In 1842 to 1845, more or less, he worked as a waiter in hotels, and he wrote a book about hotel management and being a waiter, being a head waiter. He talked about the racial and social relations of that industry. He also, even though he went to an Episcopal school, he left the Episcopal Church and joined the Methodism. It's unclear to me whether he joined the Methodist Church or whether he joined the AME or AME Zion Church. That part I am not certain of. But he joined the Methodist Church, let's say, and he began to preach social reform, temperance, as well as anti-slavery. And he says that he was the first social reformer, moral social reformer, religious reformer to go to 5 Points in New York City, which was a notorious slum at that point, very poor, lots of alcoholism, prostitution, etc., etc. By the 1850s, and the outbreak of the war, he was part owner of a bakery. And when the war breaks out, when the Freedmen's Bureau is established, he is commissioned to go to the Georgia Islands to oversee land settlement claims. There was at least a possibility that after the planters had abandoned those lands, that the formerly enslaved would get to use those lands and start farms and have an independent economic existence. However, the Andrew Johnson administration, which succeeded Lincoln after his assassination, ended those hopes. The former landholder arrived at at least one of the lands that Tunis Campbell helped to settle. St. Catherine's Island, he helped form a government there. Seems a very interesting experiment. From what I've read, that they formed like a parallel government there with a Senate and or a Congress, a Supreme Court, and Tunis Campbell is the president. But when Jacob Wahlberg made claims for his land, the prospects that the formerly enslaved would get those lands basically disappeared. But what he did was he had some savings, and he bought some land in a place called Belleville in McIntosh County in Georgia, and he sort of set up a political center there. He became the Justice of the Peace. He became He started registering black people to vote. He ran for the state senate. Actually, he was the vice president of the Republican Party in Georgia. He was part of the the state constitutional convention. He ran for state senate and won. His son ran to be a representative in the Georgia legislature, state legislature, and as part of that new government, he helped to bring in bills setting up public education in Georgia. The Reconstruction governments were the first ones to start public education in the southern states, at least in many of them. He brought forth bills to abolish prison imprisonment for being indebted or owing debts. He helped promote laws that stop segregation, allowed blacks on juries, etc., etc. So he was part of the Reconstruction government in Georgia that established or made way for black political representation and black political power, at least at some level in the state. So what happened was the opponents to this, or the planters and their allies, were horrified by this. They saw their whole way of life ending. They were scandalized by this movement of democracy, and so they organized legally and extra legally to thwart it. They managed to strip Campbell of his state senate seat. They used violence and intimidation. Campbell had actually organized a militia to defend him and his community from the Klan and probably other named groups, other named terrorist groups. So his state senate seat was stripped from him, but he remained a justice of the peace in McIntosh County in Brunswick in McIntosh County in Georgia. After in around 1875, he's accused of malfeasance in government. He is jailed and he's convicted and jailed, sentenced to a year hard labor. And so he has to serve that time. He manages to survive. At this point, he's already in his 60s. That is quite, that's a severe trial to undergo, a chain gang, convict leasing type situation in your 60s. But he survives. He leaves Georgia. He goes back north. He actually has a meeting with Rutherford B. Hayes, the new president, after the 1876 election, which essentially ended Reconstruction, or at least the really northern efforts to impose or to enforce the law, enforce the Constitution. In any event, he writes his sufferings of T.G. Campbell and his family in Georgia in 1877. And after that, there's not a lot written about him that I could find. He dies in Boston in 1891, so there's not a lot that I found, anyway, discussing his life from 1877 to his death, or his passing on, rather, in 1891. But I think his life is important. His contribution is important, especially during the Reconstruction period. Actually, even in the North, even while he was in the North, he shows the range of activities of the free black community, their dedication to ending enslavement, and their participation in the battle to end slavery during the war in various capacities. And then after the war, he shows the possibility and promise and the heroism of Reconstruction, of its democratic ideals, its democratic potentialities. That were, thwarted and crushed, but the example of what enslaved people could do. They basically came from the plantations right into government and started remaking the social and economic landscape of the southern states, bringing democracy, bringing education, bringing culture and enlightenment. Um, it's a quite an achievement, something that needs to be appreciated and reflected upon in and of itself, and not should be separated from its defeat and from the its violent overthrow. It needs to be appreciated in and of itself, and from there we can extract lessons that apply to our times. Okay, so in the name of our ancestors and the unborn, who are the same, Ashe, 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 and please share, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.